it's a subplot within a subplot of this story. But the Tories lost their deposit and very nearly got beaten by the monster raving Looney Party. The two main parties, as we traditionally imagine them, barely won a quarter of the vote in this by-election.
The Green Party have won the Gorton and Denton by-election, their first ever Westminster by-election win. Here's a reminder of how we got here.
For the electing of a member to serve in this present Parliament for the borough constituency of Gorton and Denton.
I believed I was probably in a better position than anybody to fight back.
Andy Burnham's doing a great job as the Mayor of Manchester.
And in the aftermath of all of this, I'm not going to be sort of bitter, and I'm going to be out there campaigning in the by-election.
And right now, Labour are out of the race. It's between me and Reform's Matt Goodwin.
And it is a straight fight between Labour and Reform.
Don't let Mad Zap hypnotise you into voting Green. They want to legalise all drugs, crack cocaine and heroin.
Graham was my first greyhound. Oh, I do really feel like I could just, yeah.
Prime Minister turned up to a by-election. Wow. And didn't go out and meet a single member of the public.
We need to defeat Reform and we need to defeat the far right. The Greens are by far the best place to do this.
You know, they say it's pure George Galloway, raising the salience of Gaza.
Hannah Catherine Spencer is duly elected Member of Parliament for the Gorton and Denton constituency.
There's no sugarcoating this. It has been a difficult and disappointing night for my party.
If I'd have won it, then I think we could have pushed them back.
Well, I think that's Joy Division in the background there, but there's no joy for the Labour Party. Let's get into it with the chief political commentator, Patrick Maguire. Welcome to the show, Patrick.
Good morning, Ed.
Well, you obviously predicted that they were going to lose. It's a big loss. They haven't lost that. They've held that seat since 1931. What do you take from Labour's defeat?
I take that the Labour Party is dying as a going electoral concern under Keir Starmer, to be honest with you, Ed. It is as simple as that. There is no such thing as a safe Labour seat under this leadership. This wasn't a three-way split, first past the post fluke. The Greens walked this. They won this comfortably. They won 40% of the vote in a seat that the Labour Party won a majority of the vote in only last year, only in 2024. And the two main parties, because it's a subplot within a subplot of this story, but the Tories lost their deposit and very nearly got beaten by the monster raving Looney Party. The two main parties, as we traditionally imagine them, barely won a quarter of the vote in this by-election. We are seeing the old party system crumbling under the leadership of Keir Starmer, and frankly, the damage has already been done to the Tories. Sorry to say that to a loyal Conservative like you.
I can take it, Patrick. I can take it.
Well, the long and short of this is a disaster for the Labour Party. It's existential for the Labour Party, or is at least indicative that nobody or too few people in the Labour Party are waking up to the scale of the existential challenge the Labour Party is facing. And I really don't think it's hyperbole to refer to it in those terms, because if this result is representative, and it's very similar to what we saw in Caerphilly in October, in Scotland, in Wales, and even in cities like London and Manchester, or even in bad years in previous years, they've weighed the Labour vote. The map on the weekend of the 7th of May is going to look absolutely abysmal for the Labour Party, and frankly, there's not going to be very much red in it at all.
Well, I wish you'd get off the fence, Patrick. Tell us what you really think. I'm joined in the studio by Luke Sullivan, Keir Starmer's former political director, who's obviously been listening to what you have to say. Luke, Patrick says it's existential. The map of Britain will look very different after the local elections. How bad is it for your party?
I think as Heidi Alexander doing what is probably the hardest media round for a government minister after what was a historic defeat said, there's no sugarcoating this. And I tend not to disagree with Patrick in his analysis. I think, sadly, on this, he's right. The challenge facing the Labour Party, and it isn't just the Labour Party, it is the established political parties, are, duopoly, if we've ever had a duopoly for the last 5 or so years, has fragmented. We are now in an age of multi-party politics, and the Labour Party, only 18 months in, although having done some good things, sadly looks like it is part of the old establishment. And rather than being an insurgent political government that a Labour Party always should be, and I think it is doing some good things, it is dangerously going into a set of major, we don't have midterm elections in the UK, but for all intents and purposes, they are in May. They will test the Labour coalition and its electoral coalition in ways, it appears will fragment and split in all sorts of ways to the benefit of political parties, both to its left and to its right.
Because we're doing televising the House of Commons later in the show, and the first MP to speak was Ian Gow, who was then sadly murdered by the IRA. There was an Eastbourne by-election which the Tories lost badly, and within a month Margaret Thatcher was gone. Can Labour save itself by changing leaders, or just does that deepen your problem? Luke?
I mean, to me, I know Patrick has a view on this. Look, I do think it is discounted that the Prime Minister has been in difficult political positions. Now, it depends what view you take. If you think the Prime Minister has got the right long-term plan for this country and has the ability to turn it round and, go through its electoral strategy, which has been to frame this next choice at the general election, which is still well over 3 years away, as a fight between Reform and Keir Starmer's Labour Party, then you would stick to the plan. Now, the question is he going to be given that time by his cabinet, by his Labour MPs? We saw 3 weeks ago, as Ed Miliband so eloquently said, the Labour Party looked, across the precipice and stepped back. But, as I said at the time, I think as Patrick said at the time, as many other people said at the time, the Prime Minister has been fighting for his political life. Today's result was a known. We knew that this was going to be a difficult moment for him to try and navigate. I think the problem is the reality of seeing what may happen in May going to lead to changing the status quo. And at the moment, nobody is able or willing to change the status quo. And that is partly why the Prime Minister remains in post.
Yes, people are prepared to push him out. John Trickett, the ally of Jeremy Corbyn, spoke to Times Radio's political editor Anna Mihailova earlier. This is what he said.
This signals a bigger change in the way that people see the country, its politics and its leaders. And that does mean, I'm afraid, that the Prime Minister needs to reflect on his own position, because quite a lot of time his name does come up when you're speaking to voters.
I mean, John Trickett is an ally of Jeremy Corbyn, so he could be labelled a usual suspect, Patrick Maguire. But will we see more Labour MPs put their head above the parapet, given what Luke said, how sort of we're still in a sort of status quo position?
Yeah, look, this morning we've heard from John Trickett and, Carl Turner, two people who are very used to and willing and able to criticise the government. So that's not surprising. Luke knows the cabinet as well as anybody. I don't think, as much as several of them are privately incredibly worried and angry about what's happened overnight, I don't think the cabinet are in the place where they want to start a conversation about leadership, not least because there's still no consensus over which of them should do it or, which direction they want to take the party in. I'm sure we'll hear a bit more moaning from Labour MPs today. I mean, look, what's really striking, by the way, actually something that does matter, is someone who is not given to public criticism of the Prime Minister, is immensely influential and has put out a very pointed tweet just before we came on air. I was actually, not to let daylight in upon the magic, but I was discussing this with Luke on WhatsApp just before we came on air. Angela Rayner has basically come out and said, really bluntly, Keir Starmer needs to reset the direction of his government. Now, that is the most aggressive thing Angela Rayner has done. That is Angela Rayner putting Keir Starmer on notice and setting the terms.
Yeah, let me just read it out for you, Patrick. This result must be a wake-up call. It's time to really listen and to reflect. Voters want the change that we promised and they voted for.
Yeah, that's Angela Rayner putting Keir Starmer on notice.
Can I just put to both of you the case for the defence, which is always slightly odd for me, but I do feel weirdly sympathetic to Keir Starmer in some ways. You know, by-elections are by-elections. I know it's a cliche. By-elections are by-elections, big swings mid-term, and then the governing party comes back. Why is it the tone from you, Patrick, and I think from you, Luke, is that this is existential? But having asked you the question, we're going to quickly go to Zach Balansky, the leader of the Green Party, because he's doing a quick rally.
Politics. And that's because people now recognise there is an alternative. Hannah Spencer and the team just ran the most incredible campaign, crystal clear about what Hannah stands for and what the Green Party stands for. To lower people's bills, to protect the National Health Service, and to rebuild our public services. This was the 127th target seat for the Green Party. Why is that relevant? It means there is no longer any no-go areas for the Green Party. Right across England and Wales, at local council, at Senedd, and in Parliament, we will be working hard to get Greens elected, and the starting gun has fired on local elections in 70 days' time. From Wales in the Senedd, Anthony Slaughter and Tessa Marshall, to Zoe Garber in Hackney, right across, there are names, new Hannah Spencers that aren't literally Hannah Spencers, but people who got involved in politics because they care, because they're from their local community, and they're ready to make a difference. The final thing I want to say is this. This is an existential crisis for the Labour Party. No longer can they try and scare people into saying they have to vote for something because they're worried about the least worst option. A vote for the Greens is a vote both to stop reform, to stop Labour, and for something hopeful and a plan. Talking about hopeful and a plan, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome the woman to the stage who took on the billionaire donors and won, the MP.
Well, there you go. That was Zach Balansky talking about there are no-go areas for the Greens, standing in front of a white curtain, not talking about the environment. I guess I asked earlier whether this was just a by-election like any other by-election, but I guess on the back of Zach Balansky, Luke and Patrick, this says Labour is now fighting a war on two fronts. So regardless of whether it's a flash in the pan, they're losing votes to the Greens in some areas and they're going to lose votes to Reform in others, Luke.
It is, and I think one of the things that often happens in British politics is all the signs are there if you're watching closely enough, but people don't necessarily watch closely enough. I don't think this result is particularly a surprise. If you looked at the 2024 general election, yes, it was a huge landslide, but that did also cover over some of the cracks in parts of Labour's traditional electoral coalition. And if you, I mean, look, I'm from Bristol. My parents live in Bristol Central. We used to have Thangham Debonair as our Labour MP, and she had one of the biggest majorities going into 2024. And it was turned on its head by the Greens. If you spent any time there, this result would not be a surprise. If Jonathan Ashworth lost Leicester South to independents on, ostensibly Gaza, this has been a issue with Labour's vote, with some of its strategic positions, that's not clear quite how you put it back together.
I stood in Bristol in the 97 election. I turned a 5,000 Labour majority into a 17,000
Lovely.
Labour
Which seat was that?
Labour majority. It was Bristol East. So there you go.
Was it Kerry McCarthy at that point or no?
No, it wasn't. It was Jean Corston.
Yes.
But let's not disappear down that rabbit hole. Luke Sullivan, thank you so much for coming on the show. We'll come back to Patrick after the break.